This is the moment that shakes men to their core more than anything else. Not outright rejection, not a brutal breakup, not icy silence, but the slow distance from someone who still says, I love you. One day she's warm, deeply connected, full of affection. The next day something shifts. Her energy softens, yet feels strangely farther away. She still replies, but the spark isn't the same. Her care doesn't burn with the same fire, and your mind starts racing because none of it makes sense. How can someone love you and still pull back? So you do what most men do when uncertainty hits. You push harder. You become more attentive, more reassuring, more emotionally available. You talk more, explain more, check in more often. You rush to close the gap because distance feels like danger. But every time you try to bridge it, she seems to need even more room, and suddenly you're trapped in a cycle you can't decode. The closer you lean in, the farther she drifts. The harder you work to steady the connection, the shakier it becomes. This is exactly where most men make the fatal mistake. They assume pulling away means the love is dying. But what if the shocking truth is the opposite? What if she's creating distance not because her feelings vanished, but because something subtle, invisible in the emotional dynamic has shifted? Something that changes how she feels around you, not necessarily about you. And that shift awakens an instinctive craving for space, even while genuine affection still lingers. Welcome to relationship psychology. Stoicism teaches emotional discipline when confusion strikes. A stoic man doesn't panic the second the emotional weather changes. He doesn't lunge to control the outcome. He watches the patterns because attraction isn't held together by effort alone. It thrives on emotional polarity, independence, mystery, and the sense of forward movement. When those fade, love can still exist while attraction quietly weakens. And when attraction dims, a woman doesn't always fight it. She instinctively creates distance to rebalance her inner state. That's why chasing her now fixes nothing. Explaining your feelings fixes nothing. Reassuring her fixes nothing. The real issue isn't lack of emotional expression, it's emotional pressure. And pressure never registers as love to her nervous system, it registers as weight. In this video, we break down the true psychological reasons she pulls away even when she still loves you, and the stoic response that restores balance, attraction, and respect without begging, without drama, without losing yourself. Because the man who truly understands this moment never loses his power when she steps back. He reclaims it. Quick reminder, if this content hits home for you, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment below with your thoughts too. Now let's dive deep. The instant you start chasing is the exact instant she begins feeling the pressure. The first truth you must grasp is that her withdrawal doesn't start with her. It starts with a nearly invisible change inside you. It feels like love, attention, effort, but energetically it lands completely differently. It lands as pressure. When everything feels stable, your behavior flows naturally. You're relaxed, playful, grounded. You have a life moving forward whether she's in the frame or not. Your attention is given freely, never demanded. She experiences your presence as a choice, not a need. That's magnetic because it lets her move towards you willingly. But the moment you detect her energy shifting, something inside you tightens. You become hyper-aware of her replies, hypersensitive to tone. You stop flowing and start monitoring. Without realizing, you slide from relating into managing. More texts, more reassurance, more emotional availability, all in an attempt to stabilize things before they spiral. In your head, you're being loving, mature, responsible. But to her emotional system, something else registers. She starts feeling watched instead of met. Your attention grows heavier instead of lighter. Conversations carry unspoken expectations instead of ease. She senses your emotional state, leaning harder on her responses, and even if she can't name it logically, she feels it instinctively. Attraction is deeply tied to emotional freedom. The second she feels her role in your emotional stability growing, her system reacts by carving out space. Not because she stopped caring, but because she feels the burden of being needed more than desired. Here's the shocking part. The harder you try to lock in the connection, the less safe she feels inside it. Your increased effort signals something's wrong, even when nothing's been said. It shifts the dynamic from shared connection to emotional responsibility. She starts feeling she must respond the right way, keep your mood steady, meet your emotional needs. That subtle duty drains attraction faster than any argument ever could. A stoic man knows anxiety is not a command to act. It's a signal to return to center. When you sense her pulling away, the urge to chase must be resisted. Because chasing isn't love, it's fear wearing effort's clothes. And fear always transmits energetically. The faster you rush to shrink the distance, the more you reinforce the exact pattern you're desperate to break. Her retreat is frequently a response to emotional pressure she feels but can't articulate. The more you advance, the more her system retreats, not to hurt you, but to reclaim breathing room. The stoic response begins with simply acknowledging the shift before trying to fix anything. Love can endure while attraction fades the moment polarity vanishes. This is the piece most men never grasp, and because they miss it, their reactions only make everything worse. A woman can still love you deeply, yet feel noticeably less drawn to you at the same time. Love is emotional attachment, shared history, comfort. Attraction is tension, polarity, the feeling that you remain emotionally self-sufficient. These two forces don't always rise and fall together. When things are good, they align perfectly. But when emotional dynamics tilt, love can quietly persist while attraction slips away unnoticed. Early on, you had direction. You had interests, goals, momentum outside of her. Your life didn't orbit the relationship. She felt your presence like a strong current she could join, not an empty space she had to fill. That independence created polarity. She could move toward you freely because she never felt accountable for your emotional balance. But as attachment deepens, many men make the same subtle error. They gradually center their emotional world around the relationship. Attention becomes constant, availability automatic. Life starts revolving around the bond. On the surface, nothing looks wrong. You're present, supportive, loving. But emotionally, the dynamic flips. She no longer feels like she's moving toward a grounded man. She feels like she's become the emotional center of your universe. That shift erases polarity. Familiarity replaces intrigue. Fusion replaces movement. And while fusion feels safe, safety alone cannot sustain attraction. Attraction needs space between two strong individuals, not merger into one emotional system. Her nervous system instinctively reacts to the loss of polarity. She begins feeling emotionally crowded. Even without physical demands, she senses your mood, energy, and stability are now more tied to her presence than before. That creates inner pressure. She may not know how to explain it. She might even feel guilty for wanting distance, but her system moves to restore emotional space. The shocking truth, your increased closeness, is often the very trigger for her withdrawal. You think more availability strengthens the bond. But when availability morphs into emotional dependence, attraction dims. She still loves you, but the spark is gone. So she pulls back, not to end things, but to rebalance the emotional dynamic. A stoic man understands attraction is preserved through self-mastery. He never collapses his identity into the relationship. He never makes her his emotional center, because the instant she feels your stability hinges on her presence, she loses the freedom that makes desire possible. And without freedom, attraction cannot breathe. When a woman creates distance, even while still loving you, it usually has nothing to do with fading feelings and everything to do with fading space. Emotional space isn't distance from love, it's distance from pressure. And pressure isn't always born from demands or fights. It arises when she senses she's becoming responsible for your emotional stability instead of simply sharing a connection. Attraction flourishes where there's freedom to move. She must feel she can come toward you, not that she must stay to hold everything together. When your attention turns constant, your emotional state turns reactive, your focus narrows around her, something shifts in her nervous system. She starts feeling observed rather than met. Her replies carry too much weight. Her mood has consequences. The emotional temperature of the relationship rides on her engagement. That quietly steals her sense of freedom. And when freedom shrinks, instinct is to expand it. Not out of rebellion or cruelty, but for air. She withdraws to breathe, to reset, to feel like an individual again instead of the emotional anchor of the relationship. It doesn't mean she wants to leave. It means she's trying to escape a weight she feels but can't put into words. She may even feel confused by her own pullback because she still cares. but instinct outweighs explanation. Her system seeks relief, not logic. Most men respond to withdrawal by tightening emotional reins. More talking, more questions, more checking, more reassurance. But every move confirms her inner sense that the relationship is growing heavy. The harder you try to close the gap, the more urgently she needs to reopen it. It becomes a vicious loop. Your fear of losing her fuels behaviors that amplify the very thing you dread. A stoic man breaks that loop through discipline, not persuasion. He knows emotional pressure cannot be argued away. It must be eased through energy, not words. He doesn't chase reassurance. He doesn't react emotionally to her need for space. He steps back internally, returns to center, and allows emotional breathing room without resentment. Because when she feels free again, attraction can reemerge, not because you forced it, but because you stopped smothering it. Freedom revives desire. Pressure kills it. Her distance is often her unconscious attempt to restore that freedom, not a declaration that love is gone. The more desperately you try to fix it, the worse the spiral becomes. This is usually where the downward turn accelerates. You feel her pulling away, so you ramp up effort. More sharing of feelings, more reassurance, more presence, more understanding. In your mind, it's maturity, proof that love means giving more. But the emotional message she receives is entirely different. She doesn't feel secure. She feels rising emotional intensity, and intensity without space registers as pressure. The moment you start trying to solve the distance, you shift energy from connection to correction. Conversations turn serious instead of natural. Interactions carry emotional weight instead of lightness. Your tone grows careful, your words grow loaded. She senses the relationship has become something to manage rather than experience, and management destroys spontaneity. Without spontaneity, attraction loses its fire. A stoic man knows anxiety manufactures urgency, but urgency rarely aligns with wisdom. When you act from fear of loss, your energy tightens. Even if your words stay calm, your presence broadcasts need, and need is felt instantly on the emotional level. It signals that your inner stability depends on her response. That's not a position where she can relax. It makes her responsible instead of drawn. The more you press for clarity, the more cornered she feels. The more you seek reassurance, the more she senses she must manufacture emotional certainty she doesn't currently have. That breeds inner resistance, so she retreats further, not to wound you, but to escape the perceived emotional demand. And now you feel even greater distance, which drives you to try even harder. That's how a relationship can feel like it's slipping away even when both people still care. Stoicism teaches emotional regulation before action. When dynamics shift, the answer isn't more effort, it's less emotional force. You don't fix an emotional imbalance by adding intensity. You restore balance by removing pressure. That means slowing down instead of speeding up, observing instead of reacting, holding your center instead of leaning forward. Attraction cannot grow in an environment where every moment feels emotionally charged. It grows where there is lightness, freedom, and the sense that connection is a choice, not an obligation. The instant she feels that emotional space again, her system can relax, and only in relaxation can desire return. The moment you stop chasing out of fear is the moment the emotional field resets. Not because you're playing games, but because your energy returns to self-mastery. When she pulled away, you felt unstable and tried to correct it. But the correction attempt is what amplified the instability. The stoic reversal happens when you withdraw emotional pressure and come back to your own center. No drama, no punishment, no emotional speeches. That doesn't mean turning cold or distant. It means reclaiming your grounding, letting your attention expand back to your life. Your time fills with purpose not tied to her replies. Your communication becomes lighter, not heavier. You stop seeking reassurance. You stop monitoring tone. You stop trying to hold the emotional structure together. And the absence of that pressure is the first thing she feels. Her nervous system no longer senses expectation. She no longer feels responsible for your emotional stability. Space appears where tension once lived. This is the part most men miss. They think stepping back is manipulation. But true stoic detachment isn't strategic withdrawal. It's emotional independence. You don't pull away to make her chase. You return to yourself because that's where your strength lives. When your world stops orbiting her, she no longer feels like your emotional center. That restores polarity. She feels the shift instantly, even if she can't name it. Attraction reappears in spaces of free choice. When she senses your emotional state no longer leans on her, her system relaxes. Curiosity can return, lightness can return, desire can breathe again, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped suffocating it. Your calm presence becomes inviting instead of heavy. The stoic man understands the goal isn't controlling her behavior, it's controlling his own state. When that state is stable, centered, independent, the dynamic rebalances naturally. If attraction returns, it returns freely. If it doesn't, he remains whole because he never abandoned himself trying to force an outcome. Stopping the chase isn't giving up, it's reclaiming power. Because the instant you stop trying to emotionally secure her, she can finally feel what it's like to move toward you again instead of away from pressure. She doesn't miss you when you're everywhere. One of the most overlooked psychological truths about attraction: constant presence dilutes emotional weight. When you're always available, always responsive, always open emotionally, your presence stops being something she moves toward. It becomes something that's simply there. And what's constant creates no emotional movement. It creates familiarity. Familiarity breeds comfort, but comfort alone cannot sustain desire. When she starts pulling away, many men try to compensate by increasing presence, more messages, more initiated conversations, more accessibility, believing consistency proves love. But emotionally, the effect is reversed. She can't miss you because there's nothing to miss. She can't feel curiosity because nothing changes. Your energy turns predictable, and predictability without polarity dulls attraction. A stoic man understands the value of emotional space not as a tactic, but as the natural outcome of a full life. When your attention is divided between purpose, growth, momentum, and connection, your presence carries weight. It feels intentional, not automatic. She senses being with you is a choice you make, not a need you fulfill. That difference changes everything. Desire grows where there's selectivity, not emotional submersion. When she feels you everywhere in her emotional space, she unconsciously feels crowded. Even when you're kind, supportive, loving, constant presence erases the emotional distance that fuels anticipation. And anticipation is a core ingredient of attraction. Without it, connection becomes routine. Routine feels safe, but rarely thrilling. The shocking part: your attempt to be more present can be exactly what lowers her emotional investment. She withdraws not to punish you, but to restore emotional breathing room. She needs to feel the absence of your energy to rediscover its value, not because she craves distance, but because desire demands space to move. The stoic response isn't vanishing in anger, it's rebalancing your life so your presence regains meaning. You speak when there's something worth sharing, not to fill silence. You engage from your anchor, not from fear of losing the bond. And when she feels that shift, she perceives you again as a man with his own center, not someone orbiting her emotional state. That return to centered presence is what allows attraction to awaken, because desire doesn't thrive in constant closeness. It thrives in the rhythm between presence and space. In the end, she pulls away even when she loves you, not because love disappeared, but because the emotional dynamic shifted. Attraction faded where pressure replaced polarity, where constant presence replaced space, where emotional leaning replaced self-mastery. And the painful irony is that most men react to this change by doubling down on the very thing that caused it. More attention, more reassurance, more emotional intensity, believing love is the fix. But attraction doesn't respond to intensity, it responds to freedom. The stoic lesson here isn't to harden your heart or play games, it's to reclaim control of your own emotional state. You don't chase when she withdraws. You don't rush to patch distance with words. You don't seek reassurance to soothe your anxiety. You return to center. You stabilize. You let your life expand beyond the relationship again. You remove emotional pressure by removing emotional dependence. That shift registers instantly, even without words. When she feels your energy grounded once more, her nervous system relaxes. She no longer feels responsible for your emotional stability. She can feel desire without the weight of expectation. And in that freedom, attraction finds room to return, not because you forced it, but because you stopped smothering it. If love is still present, This reset brings it back into alignment with desire. If love alone isn't enough to sustain things, you still win, because you preserved your identity, your dignity, your emotional strength. The shocking reason she pulled away was never that you cared too little. It was that your attention turned into pressure, and pressure is never felt as love, it's felt as weight. The stoic man doesn't fight emotional gravity, he simply holds his posture. He stands firmly in himself again. And from that place, the connection either grows freely or fades naturally. But he never chases. He never begs. He never loses himself trying to hold on to someone drifting away. Because the man who stays centered never loses his power when she steps back. He becomes the one she can move toward again, or the one who walks forward without her, always whole.